Initially, I was and remain absolutely fascinated by what happens inside cells when an injury or an insult occurs to that cell or collection of cells. I love nothing more than looking down the microscope, seeing the changes, seeing how cells respond to a toxic environment or free radicals and excess calcium responses, and see how that damage spreads and cells change their structure and their function. I find that endlessly fascinating. My name is Professor Lindy Fitzgerald. I'm a Professor of Neurotrauma at Curtin University in Perth, Western Australia, and I'm also the CEO of Connectivity Traumatic Brain Injury Australia, a national charity in the space of traumatic brain injury. So my career began as a PhD student at the University of Western Australia, and my PhD was centred in leukaemia research. And for the next 5 years after that, I worked in various postdoctoral positions on the east coast of Australia, all centred around cell biology, understanding disease mechanisms within cells as a consequence of different disease states. I then took an 8-year career break to raise my young family, and then I returned to research and went into neuroscience because I thought, well, I'm returning after a long career break, I can do what interests me. And I was fortunate to find a position that was again focused on cell biology and disease mechanisms. And so that has led to my career interest in traumatic brain injury. So I have been a traumatic brain injury researcher now for about 20 years at University of Western Australia, and more recently for the last 8 years or so at Curtin University. And my career has evolved from that understanding of mechanisms into a greater focus on clinical applications and what is really going to improve outcomes for people who experience traumatic brain injury. And it's also led to my work in the charity Connectivity to really translate those research outcomes into practical benefits for people who experience these injuries. I have two main areas of research focus. The first of these is in the area of understanding the disease mechanisms. What happens inside the brain when there is a traumatic injury to the brain? I am particularly interested in changes associated with myelin, which is the insulating sheath around nerve cells that help nerve cells to conduct signals. And so I have an NHMRC funded program that has looked at seeing whether there's common mechanisms of damage in traumatic brain injury and also in other neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's disease and demyelinating diseases. So that work is just wrapping up at the moment, and we've submitted that work for publication. And so the other area of interest for my research and for my research team is looking in more clinically focused work, because one of the big problems that clinicians experience in concussion is that they don't know how to predict whether people will have continuing symptoms after a concussion or mild traumatic brain injury, or whether they'll recover within normal timeframes. So we have a quite large body of work going on in the team looking at predictive outcomes following concussion. And that encompasses blood biomarkers, advanced MRI imaging, a range of different exercise physiology indicators, as well as demographic factors and symptom presentation for people who experience at the time of their injury. So we have an MRFF funded body of work referred to, we call it as AusMTBI, and that has designed an app to collect information through the HeadCheck app around what people are experiencing about their injury and their pre-existing health conditions, and also how they were treated and how they're recovering, to identify what it is about the person at the time of injury that predicts if they go on to have long-term symptoms.
The AusMTBI research program is a large-scale national collaborative effort that brings together clinicians and healthcare providers from around Australia, partnering with researchers and people with lived experience to design an online resource that will help people to manage their recovery journey and in the longer term be guided through best practice evidence-based care to support recovery from concussion.
And so we are working now to revise that app based on our findings, re-release it, and so people will be able to experience personalised care based on their symptoms that will hopefully lead them to faster recovery from their symptoms after concussion. So that MRFF body of or piece of work is coming to a close this year, and it's at its exciting phase as we are looking to implement the revised version of the app. The AusMTBI program is a large-scale collaborative initiative. There are 50 chief investigators, 50 associate investigators and 50 partner organisations. So it has really been a big collaborative effort to be able to reach as many people across Australia who experience concussion as possible. So those collaborators and the researchers come from a whole range of research institutions and universities around the country, and include key collaborators at Monash University and also the University of Queensland. And in addition to that, we have worked with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, which has been extremely important, and that work has been coordinated by Professor Beth Armstrong at Edith Cowan University in Western Australia. So there's been a whole range of different parcels of the work that have been delivered by different people, and it's that bringing together that has made this a really quite transformational piece of work in the area of concussion. We are very grateful to the funding organisations. This is the Australian Government through the Medical Research Future Fund, or MRFF Mission for Traumatic Brain Injury. And we also work closely with a whole range of partner organisations, particularly healthcare providers, hospitals, outreach organisations who reach people who experience traumatic brain injury, because we're trying to get our solution and implement the research findings, and we have to be able to reach the people with traumatic brain injury. So that's where our partner organisations have been really important. In addition to that, we've been fortunate to receive funding for our work for Connectivity Traumatic Brain Injury Australia from founding partner Curtin University, and also the Trauma Accident Commission in Victoria, who have helped support us deliver online courses to educate both people in community who experience concussion, first responders, coaches, and also more recently general practitioners, so that they feel confident in treating and managing people who experience concussion. The passion for my work has evolved over time. Initially, I was and remain absolutely fascinated by what happens inside cells when an injury or an insult occurs to that cell or collection of cells. I love nothing more than looking down the microscope, seeing the changes, seeing how cells respond to a toxic environment or free radicals and excess calcium responses, and see how that damage spreads and cells change their structure and their function. I find that endlessly fascinating. As time has passed and I've been able to interact with clinicians, I've started to realise the focus and need in community around these injuries. And this has driven a new passion for me, which is to improve outcomes following, in particular, traumatic brain injury. When I speak to the people with lived experience and I see the battles they've had to undergo, the challenges they've faced when trying to get appropriate management and clinical care, how the best practice evidence is not translated and not told to these people by their clinicians, I realise that we must do more. We must aid that translation and implementation of research into the hands of the people who can make a difference and improve outcomes following injury, in particular for traumatic brain injury, but the principle applies across all healthcare. So my passion now has really morphed into one of implementation of best practice evidence-based research. I love to debrief in nature, and they refer to it as nature bathing, where you just walk outside, and I really enjoy that along the ocean or in remote locations. That walking and getting back to nature is really important for me.